Oh, okay. No, it's good. Tonight we're going to be looking in, I got to look, Acts 27. And actually, I have preached on this before, but a little bit different than what you're going to be looking at tonight. So we're going to be looking at Paul and his catastrophe on a boat that he went through, because Paul went through more stuff than most people could handle. He would have, I don't know how he would have handled it. I mean, I don't know how you handle pressure, if pressure is something that you deal with very well, or if you're one of those people that just scream and run out of the room. We're all made different, but, well, Paul was in life or death most of the time, but I mean, the pressure of taking a test, or the pressure of, I don't know, most people, communication skills really stink these days, because we either text, email, Snapchat, where we can just get our point across through TikTok or whatever. I don't know if I should be drinking a sweet tea from stage or not, but I'm going to. So anyway, Paul, I mean, really you get to thinking that Paul really had it together because of all the stuff he went through, and he was, he's on a boat, and he is prisoner. So Paul spent a lot of his time in prison or captive for certain reasons, but it was usually, well, no, it was not usually, it was always because of trying to share his faith, trying to tell more people about the sacrifice of Jesus and things of that nature. So tonight's message is titled, Truth Changes Everything. And sometimes do you not want the truth? It all depends on what it is, right? I mean, I've learned that when my wife comes out and says, do I look fat in this dress, or is this look this way or that way? Do I look like Kitty Foreman off of that 70s show? And I made the mistake. Because you guys, most of you know me pretty well when it comes to me. I will give you the blunt, honest answer. And that's not always the best route to go. Okay, there's easier ways to tell my wife what she looks like than to just be up in her face. To come in, let's see, how should I paint this picture? To come in love and hugs and all this touchy-feely words and make her feel as gorgeous as she really is, because just one of the greatest things about her is she doesn't wear a whole lot of makeup, and she does have makeup on tonight, but it doesn't take a whole lot to make her pretty. I don't know why she has makeup on tonight. Oh, she had pictures today, that's why. But she didn't need it. Not for me anyway, because I've never been much of a guy that really chased after girls that wore a ton of makeup. It just kind of was one of those things that ran me off. If they just had like pounds and pounds and pounds of it caked on their face, I was like, bleh. So anyway, that was just my feelings towards that. So did you bring me a drink? No, we got lost. You don't have to, because I brought my own. Actually, my wife brought this to me. So anyway, I'm sorry that you got lost on your way here. Hopefully you didn't stop at a house where there was an old lady that looked like a wolf or anything like that. So when you got to Oklahoma, you knew you went too far? Oh, McDonald County. So you went up the big hill. Yeah. So and there's no cell phone reception at the bottom of that hill. So man, you're kind of going to go right along with my message today, because Paul was on a boat, and Paul didn't have any cell receptions to call for help. So no, there's somebody at home going, wait, what? Paul had a phone? No, he didn't have a phone. So we are going to be looking in 10 through 7 to start off with, and we're going to be talking about to go with the flow. There's a word after it on the screen. No. Okay. Because how many of you find yourself going with the flow? I know people that you can have one friend standing here and they say, what's your favorite color? And I would say purple, which purple is my favorite color. And this person standing here would go, that's my favorite color too. And then I would get out of the picture and my wife would show up, or maybe you would show up and say, hey, red's my favorite color. And this person standing over here would go, that's my favorite color too. Do you know this kind of people? That they're just in with whoever is with them is who they are in with. So if it is, well, we call them Fairweather Johnsons. Does anybody know what a Fairweather Johnson is? Okay, you're going to get educated tonight. No, not Natalie Johnson. No, Natalie Johnson is not a Fairweather Johnson. I mean, I don't guess. I don't know. Are you the kind of person that's just friends with whoever? Or you just go with whatever they say? Okay. So what we want to talk to you tonight is, because is there some miscued biblical truth out there? Absolutely there is. Are there some things that you can find yourself falling into that is not biblical truth? I mean, when I went home today to eat lunch, I was watching the History Channel, and they were showing where they believe the grave of Christ is at. And they actually believe this is the spot. Now, do they really certainly know? No, because they had all these other different theories that went against it, but ultimately in the end, they come down and said this is like 89-point-something% sure this is where the grave of Christ is at. So how much more percentage is it that it's not? 11-point-something, okay? Just like the day I asked my wife out on a date, and the guy that set me up with her goes, man, I'm telling you, 99.9% sure she is going to say yes. And I roll up to my wife, and I ask her out on this date, and you know what she said? No. So that point one will come back and bite you in the rear. Always look out for the point one. I want you to make sure that whenever you read biblical truth, you understand that it is 100% the honest truth, that there is nothing in there. So I want you to research everything I say. I want you to research everything you see on TV. And where is the best place to research this stuff at? Google. Google. You can't go, Alexa, what's the truth? You can't look for Google for biblical truth. I mean, you can, because ask me, if there's a pastor out there right now that's telling you they haven't ever looked anything up on Google, they're lying, okay? Or they're just living in the Stone Ages. Because sometimes I'm going, man, I can't remember where that's at, and I'll type the short phrase in there, and it'll tell me which Bible verse that it's in there as. The Bible app's good for that, things like that. Is it wrong to use this piece of electronic that I have up here? Still the same word, same Bible, just as long as I got to research it, because it's always good. I'll even catch myself with my Bible app looking in here to make sure that it reads the same way as this book, because I want to make sure that I bring you the truth, and more importantly, that me and God are on the same page with the truth as well. So Paul is on a boat. Paul is a prisoner. Paul is left port, and they are nothing but havoc the whole time. I mean, they've got storms, they got issues. At some point, they start calling Paul the devil. They think he's an evil spirit. They think he's an evil person, or there's something wrong with him, and the reason all this stuff has happened to them. Kind of sounds like Jonah a little bit. If you remember how Jonah was, they're talking about how he must be something crazy weird about him, and they were right. I mean, he wasn't possessed by a demon or nothing, but he was just running away from God. But anyway, all this stuff comes along, and Paul is trying his best to give them the best advice he can, the best truth. How many of you have poured your heart and soul into someone to give them biblical truth, and they just ignored you? So what's that like? It sucks, okay? Anything else? What's it been like for you to experience when you've tried to tell someone about Jesus, or they've threw it in your face about your own beliefs and you just don't agree with them? What's it like to try, and we hate to be like salespersons, but what's it like to try to give people biblical truth and they just shut you down? Discouraged. Huh? Discouraged? Defeated? No. Bree is all the way back there. Bree is going to have to speak up louder than she is. Okay, feels like you're not good enough, okay, or that you didn't do a good enough job getting it across to them. And sometimes maybe that is the truth. Maybe you just weren't in that place where you could explain to them that well. And that's where I always like to say, you know what, I don't want to get into a fight with you. I don't want to get in an argument, because God doesn't want me to do that. That's why I always tell you guys to do the ask, admire, admit technique to share your faith. You ask them what they believe, then you can admire something about it, and then you admit what you believe. Like today I shared my faith with the the devil worshiper guy, and I said, you know what, I admire you because you talk about the devil, and a lot of churches don't want to bring that up because it just doesn't bring people into church. It doesn't fill the tithe plate when you start telling people about a place that's bad and nasty and all that stuff. So Paul has the option. He gets to go with the flow, or he can tell them, hey, this is what's going to happen. How many of you, when we get to talking about biblical truth, when we try to share it with people, or try to talk to them about the gospel, we're telling them, hey, this is what's going to happen to you if you don't follow this truth, if you believe something different. And so In Acts 27, 10 through 11, men, he said. Now, this is kind of hard for Paul to speak up because Paul is a prisoner on a boat. And so, is it even something prisoners even have the right to speak? Normally, no, none whatsoever. Paul was really good about making friends with the people that he was captive by. Paul had a really good way of making friends with those who had him chained to them or in prison. So he said, I believe there is trouble ahead. If we go on, shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than to Paul. So is Paul giving them a warning? Yes, okay. It's not real difficult to figure out. He says, hey, guys, we need to stop because this is what's going to happen. We're going to have shipwreck, loss of cargo, and danger to our lives as well. Does this sound like anything you're trying to get across to people? Men, he said, I believe there's trouble ahead. How can we tell our friends, family, strangers there's trouble ahead? Because what is the ultimate trouble ahead for mankind? Death. And then, yeah, and then it's like that video we have, the then what video. You know, what then? What happens after you die? Paul is trying to tell them, the gospel is wrote all over this. Witnessing is wrote all over these verses right here. Whenever he says, men, he said, I believe there's trouble ahead if we go on, shipwreck, loss of cargo, and more importantly, danger to our lives. But the officer in charge of the prisoners listened more to the ship's captain and the owner than listening to Paul. Who are today's captains and ship owners in your life? Huh? No, the people that others are listening to more than you. What are people listening to more than they are listening to you? Social media. Or social media just wrap it up for you, period, right now. Yeah. The empty chairs here tonight. What is everybody listening to other than listening to God's word, than praying, than reading their Bible, being in church? What's everybody else listening to right now? What is something you can think about right now that teenagers listen to over biblical truth? YouTube. Celebrities. Music. Movies. Peers. They're all great answers because there's stuff that infiltrates your mind, and then if it starts infiltrating your mind, it starts to shape and mold your heart. And so your priorities get flipped. And I've been that person. So I know what it's like to chase something other than biblical truth, than to chase after a relationship with Christ. I am so excited for this Sunday to preach. I'm going to tell you right now, I had an opportunity today to drive around and because I know that Kathy's going to be sending me a text. What's your message? What's the title? What's the verses? All this stuff. I can tell you that God gave me Crossroads, and that's what we're going to be talking about Sunday. And I'm so excited about it because it's going to be talking about we're going to be talking about people where they're at. I hate to end sentences and prepositions, but I just did. Okay? Where people are in their walk, their relationship with Christ. And so whenever we get to listening to captains and ship owners more than we get to listening to the people of God who are trying to share stuff with us that are ultimately going to save our life in the end. Not our human life, but our spiritual life. And so Paul's doing his best to go, did Paul have some skin in the game? Absolutely. Paul didn't want to die, but then something happens to Paul. Does anybody know what happened to Paul on that boat? He had a visit. It's a really cool visit. Do you know who came to talk to Paul? Because somebody had to come to the boat. Did a little boat row up and somebody get out and get on it? Or did somebody appear? Appear. You are correct, okay? Because this is the whole message that Paul is trying to deliver these people. And Acts 27, 21 through 24, it says, no one had eaten for a long time. Finally, Paul called the crew together and said, men, you should have listened to me in the first place and not left Crete. You should have avoided all damage and loss. But take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. Now, do you think the crew is starting to go, what are you talking about? Because if the ship's going to go down, how in the world can you say that none of us are going to die? People constantly probably looked at Paul like he had a third leg growing out of his head. Because Paul would say stuff that nobody could get. But I think about Jesus sharing parables with people. Did anybody get them? No. People would walk away so confused they didn't know where they were at. And Jesus would sit there and tell his own disciples who couldn't figure it out either. And he's like, you know what? I'm going to explain it to you, but it's just for you to be revealed to. Sometimes the things God's trying to speak to us is just to be revealed to you. And so these people that are on this boat, they are looking at this, and Paul goes, yeah, don't worry about it. It'll be all right. I think it was like 20 days they were being tossed about by a storm. How long do you let storms in your life toss you about before you start to go looking or listening to the ship owners or the captains in your life, the people that are around you? How long can you take the winds and waves that are tossing you around before you start to lose focus from God? And each one of us are different. Each one of us has our own ability to hold on to God's truth longer than others. Some of us need some encouragement. I don't know which boat you're in right now, not to use that as a bad pun for this, but I don't know which situation, it really determines on what's happening, right? I mean, if I have trouble at school, then it's not as bad as if I have a family that passes away, or if there's some kind of mom and dad get divorced, or some kind of trouble of that nature. It just depends on what's going on in your life, right? But these guys have been getting thrown around for a long time, and he says, no one eaten for a long time. Paul knew that they needed to be fed. Now, the physical food is good, but is the spiritual food better? Paul knew they had a need, so Paul was always really good at hitting on people's needs. So Paul called the crew together and said, man, you should have listened to me. How bold is it of Paul to even say this? He's a prisoner. We should have never left Crete. You should have avoided all the damage and loss, but take courage. None of you will lose your lives, even though the ship will go down. He says, for last night an angel of God to whom I belong and who I serve stood beside me. And he said, don't be afraid. Paul, you will surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to everyone sailing with you. Now, what do you think the crew's response was to Paul's words? You're crazy. Remember, you're in a boat that's doing this number, back and forth, storms going on, and it's been going on day after day after day after day. Are they going to welcome what Paul has to say? What would your friends say? If you showed up to somebody that was going through this and that in their life and they're being tossed around and all this stuff, and you showed up and said, you know what? God told me it's going to be okay. What would they tell you? Even the Christians in your life might even tell you you're crazy because they don't quite understand. Because can you see, they were looking for land like crazy. And there's a part in here where it says the crew sensed land. They were looking for land to come ashore to because they're out in the ocean. How many of you's ever been out in the ocean before? Okay, my wife don't like going anywhere she can't see the bottom. Okay, if she cannot see the bottom, she does not want to get in it. For her to get out on the lake is a big deal. Now, we went to the beach for our honeymoon, but she didn't venture out that far into the water because I think, have you ever seen the movie Meg and Jaws? Okay, Joe has already explained to me there is no way he's getting into the ocean because he saw giant prehistoric sharks in a movie. There's no way he's getting that ocean. And even we were down there. Has anybody ever been to the ocean and saw bluefish streaking across the waves? They're pretty cool, but a lot of people think they're like sharks or dolphins. They think the dolphins are sharks when they see the fin out there. And so you're in a boat. Is a boat vulnerable in a storm? Absolutely. Has anybody ever been in a boat that sunk before? I have. Dad forgot to put the plug in the back when we went out to go fishing. Now, the boat didn't sink all the way, but it was filling up with water in a hurry. How nervous would you get if the boat's sinking? Okay? We've even seen it when Peter got out of the boat to walk to Jesus in the storm and sunk. I have more for those disciples that had common sense that knew where they were at in their faith, not to get out of that stupid boat. But anyway, that's a different message in itself. But he says this, he goes, you know what? Angel told me that I'm going to stand trial before Caesar. So what does that mean? Where does that mean, Paul? What's that mean on Paul's mind? Does Paul think he's going to go down in the boat, or does he think he's going to go see Caesar? Because that was Paul. Paul wanted to go stand trial before Caesar. He had a plan. Paul had a plan, and it was a good plan. Paul wanted to go stand trial before Caesar. So if an angel comes to Paul and says, you're going to stand trial before Caesar, then what's that mean is going to happen to him out there in the water with the waves and the wind crashing against the boat? That he's going to live, that he's going to survive. It's kind of like when Jesus said, hey, you know what? Let's get in the boat and go over to the other side. Now, he didn't tell him there was a demon-possessed man over there that was screaming and scratching himself and cutting himself and all that stuff. He said, let's get in the boat and go to the other side. Did the disciples run into a storm? Absolutely they did. But see, this is what Jesus does. Jesus doesn't say, let's go halfway and drown. He says, let's get in a boat and go to the other side. So Paul is like, hey, you guys need to hold on a little bit. There's something better ahead if you'll just listen to me. Do you think he got their attention a little bit? Because he told them, I told you we should have stayed there. How many of you ever told your friends who did something really stupid they shouldn't have done that? Anybody? I got a ton of them. How many of you have ever been that friend that should have listened to the people that were telling you not to do something because it was incredibly stupid? That is me. I have done that a lot, okay? I have a t-shirt. So anyway, he tells them, don't be afraid. Or the angel says, because you'll surely stand trial before Caesar. What's more, God in his goodness has granted safety to each one of you. So here's the deal. Practice what you preach so others will eat. What are we wanting people to eat? Don't say pizza. I'm not talking about physical food. What are we wanting people to ingest? Fruits. I'll take fruits of the Spirit. I'll take that kind of eating. That's good food. You're wanting people to... Because Jesus really weirded people out. He'd say, eat my flesh. Now, how turned off is that? You're going to eat my flesh. So, I mean, even his own family is like, Jesus, you got to quit doing this, eat my flesh, drink my blood stuff, because people are freaking out, okay? So you got to stop this crap. People are starting to think you're crazy, okay? If I walked up and said, eat my arm, what are you going to say? What is wrong with you? Where did your mind twist overnight, okay? He's like, you know what? You guys haven't eaten in weeks. But what was Paul trying to give them the whole time? God. He's trying to give them Jesus. Paul was constantly trying to give people Jesus. Do you have people in your life that are spiritually starving? How are they spiritually starving? What's something right now that you know people that are spiritually starving? Yes. Okay. I gave you guys a pen and a paper. I want you to write down something about somebody. You don't have to write their name. I just want you to write how someone in your life is spiritually starving. It can even be you. But I prefer it be somebody else right now. Somebody in your life, and if you're watching this at home or watching it later, write down how someone in your life is spiritually starving. I'll give you just a little bit before we figure that out, because we want you to practice what you preach so others will eat. Right now, I really hope there's sweet tea in heaven. That's what I hope for. It's probably not sweet tea. I'm probably not going to desire sweet tea when I get to heaven. How sad. Have you got your wrote down? It's a short answer. How many of you had a hard time picking one person? Like really focusing on one person that's spiritually starving in your life right now. Because Paul, all the way back, even in 21, says, no one had eaten for a long time. How many? No one. Why is it important to practice what you preach? Yeah, so you're showing people what it is. Would it have been hard to not freak out on this boat? Would it have been hard to be in Paul's shoes and still be trying to be a leader, even though you're not? Because ultimately, who's in charge of the boat? The captain is in charge of the boat. I mean, I'm talking, who's in charge of making sure this boat go down? The captain and the crew is charged. Paul's just a prisoner. So is Paul up on top or is Paul down below? Most likely he's in below. So for him to be able to talk to anybody, he's got to be screaming it through the floorboard. I mean, I was just picturing this in my own mind, that Paul is down there screaming through the boards, "I told you so." And how welcome is that from someone you're trying to reach? "I told you so." Maybe not the best words you should use, but I think Paul may not have had their attention, but I think God had their attention with the winds and the waves crashing everywhere around. And just because, I want you to understand, every time there's something bad happens in your life, doesn't mean God caused it, okay? But he did allow it to pass through his hands. And are you okay with that? That's the big issue. And so anyway, Paul is trying to do his best to convince these guys that there's something ahead. They're not going to die. Just like we're trying to reach our lost friends and family to let them know, you know what? You may die a physical death, but I'm more worried about the spiritual death that you could die. And so I'm trying to tell you that an angel of the Lord has told me I need to tell you about Jesus. You remember last week when I said tell 4 people? One of you came abruptly to me, honestly, at the start of this and said you told 2. And then we talked about a third. That almost happened but didn't. But how hard is it for you to share to 4 people throughout the week? Because for some of you in this room, it may be, I didn't share with nobody. And so do you get distracted? Do you get distracted by the ship's captain and the owner of boats because they captivate your mind? When I was speaking at that youth retreat this last weekend, I was trying to ask students, what are you putting ahead? You know, you can tell real quick, a lot by people's social media even, what they put their faith and trust in. If it's Jesus, or if it's some sporting event, or if it's some other school deal, or if it's whatever it is they just want to throw on there, you can tell where people are at in their Christian walk with their social media. You know, if they put out partying and drinking on there and things like that, but you see them in youth on Wednesday night or maybe on church on Sunday morning, and it carries over into their adults. So we are to practice what we preach so other people can feed off of that. Now, sometimes you're given dessert, right? Sometimes you're giving people cheesecake to eat, that good lovey-dovey spiritual stuff. But then sometimes you got to feed them some broccoli or some other nasty vegetable that you don't want to eat. Now, I like broccoli and cheese, but it's got to have cheese on it. I can't eat broccoli if it ain't cooked. It's kind of like right now I'm drinking raw vinegar because they told me it was good for me with some things that are going on. And I'm going to tell you right now, it's hard to stomach. That's what I'm drinking, apple cider vinegar. Trust me, the gag reflex kicks in whenever you start to drink it straight. So anyway, people want the cheesecake of religion, but they don't want the peas. I can't stand peas. I don't like peas. You can love peas all day long. I don't like peas. You got your own vegetable right now you're thinking of, like, ew. Asparagus, cauliflower. I mean, basically, if it's in the vegetable aisle, there is something I could hit you with that you just don't like, okay? So I could take you right now to the Cheesecake Factory, and you would find something there you would eat, correct? Probably, okay? Unless you're my son Joe, who doesn't like cake, and he doesn't like ice cream, and that's it. He is strange. Yes. So, Acts 27, 33 through 36, just as day was dawning, Paul urged everyone to eat. See, Paul again. Paul's like, we got to get some food, okay? We're hungry. And so you have been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks. How many of you could not eat for 2 weeks? How many of you have been so worried before you couldn't eat for 2 weeks? Oh, man. Maybe you've, like that boy broke up with you or whatever, and you just couldn't eat or whatever. Some of you may have broke up with that boy or girl and drove straight to Subway. Okay, I don't know how that worked out for you, but you've been so worried that you haven't touched food for 2 weeks, he said. Please eat something now for your own good, for not a hair on your heads will perish. Then he took some bread, gave thanks to God before them all, and broke off a piece and ate it. Then everyone was encouraged and began to eat. This is what the world's looking for. They get into this starvation mode, and are they looking for you to feed them something? Okay? I've went to people, I've even been on the recipient end of it with a death in the family. When my mom died, people could have threw every kind or every scripture at me there was. It made me feel better. Scripture is good, but at the moment when you are in the middle of the worst part of your day or your life, words are not always going to there's no magic words out there. There's no book. But everyone was encouraged and began to eat. Is sometimes just your presence enough? Sometimes our people are looking for you to just sit with them. That's all Jesus wanted when he was praying in the garden, grieving so much to the point that he was like crying blood, sweating blood. And so he just needed the disciples to go with him and be there and sit there. And so a lot of these people, you can think of someone in your life right now that is in such a spiritual, even mental, desperate mode that all they're looking for is some kind of encouragement. And sometimes just simply being a part of their life is the encouragement they need. Sometimes seeing how you handle the ship rocking back and forth is the encouragement that they need. That's why it's so important for me to practice what I preach. That's why it was really hard for me that day. I preached my mom's funeral and then load up and go straight to camp. And then after that, go straight into a mission trip. But I had to practice what I preached, that I knew God was in control, that I knew my mom was in heaven, that I knew her salvation had came full circle. Even as sad as I was that it was that she was gone, I still had to practice what I preached, that I believe there's a heaven, that I believe this is where she's at, and I believe one day I will see her again. I remember when my wife's brother passed away, it was hard because that was even, at least my mom's, I could see it coming. But her brother's was a teetotal accident. That wasn't something that you could even see happening. And so it's hard, especially when it blindsides you like that, to really practice what you preach. And so these guys have been on this boat for weeks, and all this stuff had been turning around left and right. And some of them, do you think they had lost teetotal hope that they'd ever see land again, that they would live? And so we get all the way through this story, and I wish I could break it down more for you in the night, but he says that to be encouraged, and so they ate. They started to receive what Paul was talking about. Paul got them calmed down, he got them settled down, and he started to encourage them and give them what they needed. Something for you to think about. How can you settle the spiritually unrested people in your life down, those people that you wrote down on your paper? How can you settle those people down to understand what you're trying to give them, how you're trying to encourage them? It's just something for you to answer on your own. And so the last part here we look at, they want to know how you did it. A lot of times on the outside we look like we have it together, correct? Is it good to let them know on the inside you were running scared too? That you still had where you doubted this was going to happen, that you doubted God was going to come through. Because if there's not a Christian walking the earth that has never doubted God was going to come through. We've all have doubts of some sort. And so here's the really cool thing that happened. If they go through all this stuff and they get all crashed and they eat and they get on land and they have these natives that come up and get them, and there's a really cool part in there with a snake. Has anybody ever heard the story about Paul and he throws a stick of wood on the fire and a snake comes out and it bites him on the hand? Oh, it's one of my favorite parts because Paul has this snake stuck to his hand and it says that it held on to him. Most snake bites that you hear people get bit out here today, it's a snake bite, it's just a whack and they're done. This describes the snake bit onto him and held onto him. And what did Paul do? He had this really cool Taylor Swift moment and he shook it off. Okay? And so he gets it off of there, and it says they stand there and stare to see what happened to him. Are people standing there staring at you to see how you handle something? Because they all expected Paul to die. Because he got this poisonous snake had got onto his hand. But after they see the way Paul has handled the ship, they see how Paul has handled them, and they see how Paul has handled the boat. This is what we see happen next. In Acts 28, 7 through 10, it says, "Near the shore we landed was an estate belonging to Publius, the chief official of the island. He welcomed us and treated us kindly for 3 days. As it happened, Publius' father was ill with fever and dysentery. Paul went to him, prayed for him, and laying his hands on him. Then all the other sick people on the island came and were healed. As a result, we were showered with honors, and when the time came to sail, people supplied us with everything we needed for the trip." How did Paul's faithfulness work out for him? Shipwrecked. Bit by a snake. People thought he was evil, thought he might be an evil spirit, but then after he shakes off the snake, they thought he was God. So at one moment they think he's evil, next moment they think he's a god. So does he have two different perceptions from people in all of this stuff that he went through? Of course he does. But then he gets to give an ultimate witness, because I know that all of you don't have the power to just walk around and touch people's heads and heal them of all their sickness. If you believed enough, probably could. But because how would you like to go around right now and just touch people and heal them from Rona? How would you love to go around? I'd love to go to St. Jude. Just touch them all. Poof. No more cancer in that hospital. I'd love to go down here to Hogg, where my wife has to go, and just walk in there and touch all those people I see with those drips, and it'd be gone. I'd love to have been able to touch my mom, and it would have been gone. But people are watching to see how we handle it, even when we don't have the power to walk up and heal somebody. People are looking to see how we handle it. And Paul handled every storm in his life with a godly attitude and a Christ-like attitude, and people started to believe what he was saying. And he walks up and he touches this guy and he heals him, and then more people start coming. More people start coming, just like they did with Jesus, wanting to be healed, wanting to be healed. When you show people the Christ that's alive inside you, more people will start coming. More people will start coming, because how many of you have they know you're a Christian, and so you have these friends that don't really follow Christ, but when they got trouble in your life, you're the one they come and talk to, because you seem like you have it all together. Now, they don't see what's going on inside, but they want to know what you have inside that helps you handle it on the outside. They want to know what you turn to. They want to know how you went through this terrible storm in your life and you're still moving forward today. So I want to give you the chance tonight as we close. I want you to see I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 sitting here, 9, 10 back there. I want you to break up in groups of 5. And I want you to take those pieces of paper that you have, and I want you to pray with each other about those. You don't have to use names, but I want you to get together as a group and say, hey, this is how I have someone in my life that I'm praying for spiritually. This is what I'm praying. And you can say their name if you want to. That's your choice. And say, will you pray with me? Because this is all going to roll right over into Sunday and what I'm going to be preaching on Sunday. Will you be willing to pray with me about this person in my life? Because I think that's one thing we don't do enough here together as a group. And this is something you're going to start seeing on Wednesday nights. We're going to break up at the end of the night with 10 minutes left, 15 minutes left, and we're going to start praying together over the stuff that's real to us, stuff that's going on in our life. Because Paul knew that he had to do everything through God. If you don't think Paul was talking to God when he's trying to heal these people, you're fooling yourself. He had to be all like, God, help me. Okay, we're dead if this don't work, probably. That's what would be in my mind. Because I'm in no man's land. The island of Malta, you can see it on a map. It's a teeny, weeny little island. It's out in the middle of nowhere. Some of the people you're dealing with, they are shipwrecked on Malta. There's a real Malta in their life. It's a little bitty island, and they feel like they're isolated from the rest of the world. I'll let you break up into your groups of 5, and I want you guys to share with each other tonight before we get out of here. So I'm not going to tell you which group, who to go to. You guys just figure it out. I'm sorry I didn't number you 1 through whatever, but I'll just split it. Okay, I got 3 here and the 2. So if you 3 here can go back to those 2 back there, that'd be great. And then the rest of you over here, that'd be super. Yes. Nope. So if you are at home watching this or you're watching this later, I encourage you to break up in a group with these things that you wrote down and just share it with your friends or your family.